Okay, this morning we're going to, 1 second. Yeah, okay. This morning we are going to study Haggadah. It's just 2 weeks away from Yontif. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So we are really in the home stretch to the Haggadah, to the experience of Pesach night. So I thought we would do today an analysis of Manish Tana, because Manish Tana is, without a question of a doubt, the best known section of the Haggadah. It might not be the most important, but it's certainly the best known section. And I'm going to give you a totally different view of Manish Tana than I think you've ever heard. And the approach I want to take is using the Manish Tana as the format of a discussion of how did our sages, how did Chazal see the concept of Torah learning, education? What was their view on how education is supposed to happen? And we're going to see that Manish Tana is a perfect paradigm of their view on how to educate children correctly. And it's not just children, of course, but I'm saying children because usually we think of education of parent and child, right? But it's so much more than that. So let us begin. I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of Divrei Chazal in the halachic framework, and then we'll look quickly at the Manish Tana. But a lot to say, and interrupt anytime you have a comment by all means. This is supposed to be like Manish Tana, a dialogue, not a monologue, okay? But let's begin. So the first thing the Shulchan Aruch states in the halacha pertaining to Manish Tana, to the Seder, it says, "V'oz yitzaveh lahasiram mehashulchan ulanicham b'sof hashulchan ke'elu kvar ochlu k'dei shiyu hatinokos v'yishalu." You know how you're supposed to set up a Seder, he says, the halacha says, and then you're supposed to remove the table, which really means today the ka'ara. Remove the table or put it at the end of the table, and the child will then see that something is happening, and what's going to happen? He will begin, or she will begin, asking questions. And this is based on a Gemara in Pesach. How do you introduce Manish Tana? How do you introduce the real Seder, this dialogue between generations? And it is a dialogue between generations. It is the most powerful night of all nights. It just is. When you think of the experience of Seder, it is amazing. I'll share with you a very personal experience. I now have the nachas of going to my children for Yontif. You know, they would always come to me, but now they're rabbanim themselves. And, you know, you get to a certain point, I suppose, when you get the senior rabbi, that you get a certain privilege of going away although, by the way, they had offered it for many, many years and I never took it off. But now my children can't come to me. So I go to New Jersey. So I think it was a few years ago, and my oldest grandchild, Moshe, had prepared and was so excited by the Seder, and he knew that Zadie is coming with his questions. I come with a pack of questions for them. Each one gets an envelope, and if they get the question, and the questions are all prepared and cut out, and if I add, they keep on saying, Zadie, more questions. If they get it right, they put it in the envelope, and Chol HaMoed, I have to pay up. You know, that's the way it works. So they're excited. And Moshe was so exhausted. Suddenly, in the middle, his younger brother, Shaya, had fallen asleep already. And Moshe was so exhausted that he didn't know why, but he started to cry. It was by Shulchan Aruch. He just started to cry. And so we put him to sleep. And the next morning, he was 5 or 6 years old when this happened. The next morning, he said, I was so excited by the experience, I just started to cry. I don't know why I cried. And the next morning, he's very intuitive. He understands himself in many ways. And it was just a beautiful moment that he was so excited by the experience. And that's what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to be a conversation of generations. So how did Chazal say? So what did they do? They set up a paradigm for us. And if you use this paradigm in education all of the time, you will succeed. So what are you supposed to do at the beginning? What are you supposed to do? They say, to start the conversation, move away the plate, move away the table. They used to have these kind of tables. Dismantle the table. Well, what's the child going to say? Well, what's going on here? I never have a meal with you dismantling the table. So we no longer do that. So the idea was take the ka'ara and move it to the end of the table. We don't do that either. But because there's nothing on the ka'ara that a child will say, hey, you're not giving me food now. But what's the point? What is Chazal telling us? Good education, rule number one, good education requires what? Preparation. We expect it from our teachers, right? We want them to prepare. We would be very upset and we would complain to the principal if the teacher walked in, day out, unprepared. There is never a tolerance in chinuch without being prepared. You know, I will not give a shiur unless I have prepared. If I don't have the opportunity because of the levaya or whatever, I cancel the shiur. I'm not wasting my students' time because the teacher has to be prepared. Lesson number one. That is crucial that Chazal is teaching us. There's another statement that Chazal is making here. There's another insightful comment. It's use props for educational purposes. The more visual you can make it, the better it will be for the child or for the student. I don't care what age, the better it will be. That's why, as of late, what have a lot of teachers done? It wasn't done so much when I was growing up, but now you see it. They give you source sheets. Why do they give you source sheets? It's a prop. It's a prop. You'll see, you'll visualize. All of these acts are so crucial in teaching. And certainly when you're teaching history, the more props you have, the more I've heard from outstanding teachers that teach history, in particular in the younger ages, where they'll develop props for the kids to live. You know, they'll on the board, even puppets and whatever they do. You know, they come in dressed like, you know, George Washington and Lincoln and whoever else they're teaching. It's so crucial. Why? Chazal were telling us that props make a big difference in education. Continues on. The Magen Avraham notes that today we don't remove the ka'ara because this wouldn't arouse any child because there's no food that he's expecting or she's expecting on the Seder plate. But rather, what do? We cover the matzot. We cover the matzot and then we uncover the matzot. You see this constantly, right? We cover and we uncover and we cover and we uncover. And when we're ready to start talking about manishtana, rather, what is it? We cover the matzot, hoping this will raise the child's, and then we'll uncover the matzot so that the child will say, what's going on here? Halacha needs to be lesson number 3. Halacha needs to be current. It's very, very important. There was a halacha that says, move the table. Move it. So what are we going to do? Start dismantling our tables? That's not current. Halacha needs to be current. I say today, you know, I was just talking to a mechanech, an outstanding mechanech. I said, the Shulchan Aruch, you can't give a curriculum of just, okay, we're going to start with Siman Aleph and Shulchan Aruch to kids. Because a lot of those statements in Shulchan Aruch in particular on how you conduct yourself in the morning no longer apply. They didn't have internal plumbing. They didn't have faucets and running water and electricity. And it was written, the Shulchan Aruch itself was written in the 16th century. And you teach it word by word in the Shulchan Aruch, that is going to be a disaster in the making because the kids will not relate to, what are you talking about? This is not the way we don't have an outhouse where we have to go to the bathroom. We have toilet paper today. We have, you know, all of the things that we have. Well, guess what? You have to make halacha current. And halacha knew that. And the Magen Avraham says, no, we no longer do this. It has to be current. And it has to be it has to relate to the child. So lesson number one, right? A good education needs preparation. Lesson number two, you use visual props. And lesson number three, it has to be current. It has to relate to their lives. Next, the Shulchan Aruch tells us that we pour, right before you begin Manishtana, what do you do? Yeah, I think he says it here. No. Moskim, if you take a look at the very top in Hebrew, Moskim kos sheni, right? Umisalkim es haka'ara, the kan haben shoel. You know, hey, what do you do? Moskim kos sheni. You pour a second cup. Now, that's interesting. What would be the problem? We'll talk about this in 2 seconds. Take a look at Manishtana. You pour a second cup. There's no question of the second cup in Manishtana. There are 4 questions here. By the way, historically, it wasn't always 4. It could have been 3. It could have been 5. And we have texts for 4 questions. We have texts for 3 questions. We have texts for 5 questions in ancient sources. But it boiled down to the 4 questions. And that's what we call Manishtana, right? The 4 questions. But one of the most important questions that you would expect there is not there. I don't usually see a second cup being poured. So that's the question that we're going to have to ask. Why isn't it part of the Manishtana? We'll come to that in 3 seconds. But what do you think Chazal were doing by saying, don't start Manishtana, don't start this dialogue with your children without pouring a cup of wine? Why? More questions. Okay, but the only problem is it's not there. So that can't be it, right? I think what Chazal is insisting is the experience has to be elegant. Wine is elegance. You drink wine at a table, you know, even if you go out to dinner and you buy a bottle of wine, you're being pretty big, right? You're being more elegant than usual. You had the first cup as part of Kiddush, correct. But now we're pouring another cup. Wine plays a very important role on Seder night, doesn't it? The whole experience is one of elegance. Interesting, Rav Yosef says we have everything we reenact on Seder night that experienced at Yitzias Mitzrayim, except one, it seems. We left Beruchush Gadol. What's Beruchush Gadol? We left with tremendous wealth. So he says, oh, yes, we do. What do? We set our table beautifully. A Seder is supposed to be set halachically, really. Can't you use paper plates or, disposable? If you're having a big Seder and it's going to cause you tremendous tension and anxiety about washing all of those dishes, I said, fine, you can use, but what kind of paper plates? Exactly. You go the extra step. You don't buy the regular, just simple paper plates. No, you buy nice, and you can buy, and they become pretty expensive, right? You can buy really nice. Now, if you're not using paper plates, what are you taking out? You're taking out nice china, nice goblets for your Seder. Why? It's Beruchush Gadol. The Seder should look gorgeous. Elegance is so important a message when it comes to teaching Judaism. We're an elegant religion. That is so important. It's impressive. Yes.
Because we are all royalty.
That's correct. That's correct. But how do you impart that to a child? I remember, when I was a little boy, and when I was raising my girls, we set the Seder table the night of B'dikas Chametz. In other words, they went to sleep, and the next morning they woke up. The Seder it's a day yet. It's a day yet to go. But in the dining room, the Seder table was already set. Well, what do you think that does to a child? Wow, it's exciting. You make it exciting. You make it, and you don't make it just run of the mill. You make it elegant. You pour that second cup. Wine is going to play a very important role. So now the question is, where is that second cup in the Manishtana? Why isn't it? So actually, there is an opinion that it was one of the four questions, one of the questions in the Manishtana. There is a text that has it. There was one of, but it's not there. Why is it not there? Our text does not have it. So it begs the question, why don't we put it into our? I think it should have been one of the first questions. If you're saying that these are the questions that a child is going to ask, oh, that immediately gives us a bit of a clue. Is the Manishtana the questions that the child really asks? I'll ask it differently. Can you prepare the child with a rote question and answer experience and expect it to be exciting? Definitely not. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, you don't prepare a child like that for a Seder. That's not what you want at a Seder. When my girls were being raised, I would not let them bring their notebooks to the table. I would not want to see them. You'll show them to me on Pesach morning at lunch. Show to me at lunch all that you did, so I know that my tuition is being properly, properly paid for. But do not bring your books, your notebooks to the table. I will prepare questions for you, and you can ask me questions. It has to be a exciting experience, simultaneous. It has to be, what am I looking for? Spontaneous, thank you. It has to be more of a spontaneous experience. So why don't we ask the Dalit Kosos? Why don't we mention that in these Manishtana questions? Why? So the Abarbanel says, because slaves drink wine just as much as, as freemen. In ancient times, wine was the drink. It was the drink. So wine was available. It didn't do what? It didn't demonstrate necessarily chayrus. It didn't. We drink it
Why
for.
is it associated with elegance?
Today it's associated with elegance. It has the more and more you drink, yes, it is it is an expensive.
I thought that,
but
Rabbi, I thought that wine is associated with redemption, the 4 stages of redemption.
It is. But the Barbanel notes, is it a limited beverage that only the royalty drink? Not at all. By the way, there's all levels of wine, as we know. You can go into the store and get a Chablis, for under $10. It matters what you're drinking, correct? So yes, but he points out, Barbanel says it doesn't necessarily manifest the concept of chayrus because slaves also drink it. So that wouldn't strike as a unique experience, he says. Seder night has to be unique. This is another lesson. Seder night has to be uniquely a Jewish experience. I'm going to come back to that in 3 seconds. Similarly, Dalit Kosos don't demonstrate the celebration of the Seder as uniquely Jewish because all men celebrate drinking. It's not Jewish that we drink, just the opposite. And the Manishtana has to be uniquely Jewish. Now, here I want to share with you a Rambam. No, well, that was not a good right. I want to share with you a Rambam. The Rambam says in Hilchos Chametz and Matzah, Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph. He says, and I'll quote it to you in English. It is a positive mitzvah in the Torah to recount the miracles and the wonders that were done on behalf of our ancestors in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Nisan, right? It's a mitzvah to observe this night and to share all of the miracles and wonders that were done to us. In accordance with the biblical verse, remember the day on which you left Egypt. All fine, right? We have a biblical verse, the Rambam says, we have to reenact at Seder night, Yetzias Mitzrayim. And then the Rambam adds, this is similar to the verse, remember the Sabbath day. Listen to this again. The Rambam says, you're to do what? You're to celebrate the Seder, reenact, recount all of the miracles, right? Because the Pasuk says, remember on the day which you left Egypt, Exodus 13:3. And by the way, the Rambam adds, and the Rambam doesn't write, and by the way, that's not his style. If he's adding a comment, there's a good reason for it. And by the way, he says this is similar to the verse, remember the Sabbath day. What? It's just because one says remember and the other says remember? What was the Rambam doing by saying the Zechira, the experience on Seder night has to be like the experience of Kiddush on Friday night? Is everybody following me? What is the Rambam saying? That is the question that the commentaries have dealt with. On this Rambam, they've written a literature. You can fill up a library. The Rav explains it brilliantly. The Rav says the Rambam is teaching us a very important lesson. What does Kiddush do on Friday night?
It's going to outside.
What does Kiddush do on Friday night?
To separate between the
Thank you. Say it again.
separate between the days of the week to make it kadosh, and kadosh is separation.
Unique.
Unique.
Friday night, Shabbos is different than the other 6 days of the week. And how do I do it? I make Kiddush. That is exactly right. In other words, Kiddush, it makes Shabbos uniquely different than the other 6 days. What is the Rambam saying about Seder night? It is uniquely different than any other night. Just like Kiddush makes it uniquely different than the other days of the week, what does Seder do? Uniquely different than any other night of the year. That is what the Rambam is saying. Then, therefore, what has to happen at Seder? It needs to be all an experience that is Jewish. People have asked me, do you think, Rabbi, you should have, we can invite non-Jews to the Seder? The truth is, I mean, there are halachic issues, if you're going to have Eino Mevushal wine, and if you're going to have Bishul on Yontif, you have numerous questions pertaining to non-Jew. But I don't think it's the place for the non-Jew, to be honest. Seder is uniquely a Jewish experience. It is meant to be a uniquely Jewish experience. There are experiences. If there's a good look, if a convert, a potential convert, a person who's studying to convert, do they belong at the Seder? 100%. Rabbi Gedalia Schwartz, Zichrono Livracha, the Av Bezdin of the RCA Bezdin, who lived in Chicago for many, many years, was the Av Bezdin of the CRC in Chicago also. He said, how else is a convert going to learn if you don't invite them to a Seder? 100%, 100%. But what is the lesson that we're being taught? The lesson we're being taught is that Seder is uniquely Jewish. And that's a crucial lesson, a very important lesson, right? Everything that has to be done has to be uniquely Jewish. So therefore, the Barbanel says, now let's go back. What about this extra goblet? Is that uniquely Jewish? No. Beverages were drunk by everybody. How do non-Jews celebrate it too? So it didn't get into the Manish Tana. Interesting. You'll use wine as an elegant act, right? As a manifestation of elegance. But does it get into the Manish Tana? What is the Manish Tana? The Manish Tana is a formula for demonstrating that this night is different than all other nights, right? Okay. Next, let's take a look at a few different sources. I pointed out that we have numerous sources that indicate which questions should be asked. So the Gemara in the Bavli mentions chametzu matzah. We have that, correct? You have the Manish Tana in front of you. Maror, it's there. Basar tzli. What's basar tzli? A roasted meat. It's not there. It's not there. And matbiling shtei pa'amim, dipping twice. So one of the comments, one of the questions of the Bavli doesn't exist in there, right? So the question is, why don't you mention? Why don't we follow the Bavli? Answer: we already gave it. Good Jewish education has to be current. It has to be up to date. It has to be something that the child or the adult, whoever's learning, will relate to. Do we have basar sleep today? No, we don't have basar tzli. We don't have a Beis Hamikdash. We don't have a mizbeach. We're not roasting a korban Pesach. Therefore, it doesn't belong. The Yerushalmi has a different list. It has 3, not 2. It has 3. I remember I told you there's 3, there's 4, there's 5. Matbilin shtei pa'amim, dipping twice, yes. Chametz and matzah, and basar tzli. Again, we're not even following that, right? So you have sources for 3 questions, sources for 4 questions. Stop for a half a second, and what does that tell you? What does that tell you about Manishtana, which we're going to raise? Oh, it did change. Is the text what you're expecting the child to say? Does the child have to recite the Manish? Who has to recite the Manishtana? The youngest person. Interesting. That's what you do in your house. The youngest child. When I was growing up in the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland, I don't know why in 2nd grade, my Rebbe thought that he had to teach us the Manishtana, not only in the Hebrew, but in Yiddish. And for the life of me, I was not interested, nor did I did not have a facility for it. I do not have a facility for many languages. There are people that do, and I could not master it. I just could not master it. I thought it was the biggest waste of time because I knew my father spoke Yiddish, but my mother didn't. And I don't think they would be so impressed for me to say it in Yiddish. So I never mastered it. But is that what we're supposed to do? We'll teach the kids how to say it in multiple languages. We'll teach the kids how to say it in one language. Is that what we're expecting to do? No, we'll see that in 2 seconds. Most probably the child was not expected to say Manishtana at all. Rabbi Soloveitchik points out, in his family, who said the Manishtana? Everyone said the Manishtana because everyone said the Haggadah together. It was not relegated to the child. Okay, now the Rambam has another text, by the way. He has 5. So he has Matbilin shtei pa'amim, dipping twice, Chametz and matzah, basar tzli. He does mention basar tzli, marar, which wasn't mentioned up to here, right? And heseba, reclining, right? So the Rambam then remarks, he mentions all of these 5, then he remarks, basar tzli, you shouldn't say because we don't have a korban Pesach. So he makes it current. But when we did, there were 5 questions, not 4. So you should know that. The logic, what about the logic of the order? The logic of the order. Why is it ma'pilin shtei pa'amim, dipping, then chametz matzah, then basar tzli, then morar, and then haseba? There was a logic for it. The order of the Rambam is adopting how they were experienced at the Seder. In other words, that's crucial too. When a teacher prepares the material, it has to be logically relatable to the child, to the student. It has to follow a logic, okay? Very important. Now, let's continue on. There was a whole argument about reclining. Reclining, why do we recline? Supposed to, you recline at your table tonight? Friday night? Oh, so there was a whole debate among the Rishonim. Tell me, they wanted to know, should we require Heseba today? Fine, Heseba made sense. Then that's what they did. That is how they acted. That was the manifestation of royalty, but no longer. The Rav Yon, both said, you don't have to. Heseba shouldn't, but we don't paskin like them. We paskin like you should recline. Why? Why do you think? We don't pass. It's an interesting argument, isn't it? We've been saying, make it current, make it current. Is this current or isn't this current? It's not current. So why do we do it? Is it a violation of our own principle, one of our own principles that we said about Manishtana? What do you think? Is that Seichel Tziat Mitzrayim that you're reclining? Oh. Well, we saw that we do change certain things, don't we? We do change. We want to make it current. We want to make it. We don't mention basar tzli. Why? Because we no longer have a korban Pesach. A kid won't relate to that. I don't know what you're talking about, right? I have never seen a basar tzli because I've never seen a korban pesach. Okay, we remove it, correct? Why should we do haseba? By the way, again, the Rav Yan say, you know what? It doesn't make sense to keep it. But that's not the consensus opinion. The consensus opinion was that you do keep it. Any reason? Or, by the way, was it originally included? Was it originally included or not? The Gra says, no, it was added. It wasn't in the Talmud even. No, it wasn't in the Talmud. It was added later as one of, and it is here, right? It's number 4. We sit either reclined, but tonight I see that you're reclining. Why do we recline? Interesting. I'm going to give you a fascinating answer from a 20th century brilliant mind. His name was Rav Menachem Kasher. We have his works right up there in the library called Torah Shlema. Torah Shlema, he was an encyclopedic genius. My parents knew Rabbi Kasher personally because his daughter was very close to friends of my parents from Hashem Hadati days. Rav Menachem Kasher was just unbelievable. And so he says the following in his beautiful Haggadah. He has a Haggadah called Haggadah Shlema. There's a work by Menachem Kasher called Haggadah Shlema. He says, it doesn't mean recline. Everybody says Haseba means recline. It doesn't mean recline at all. That's correct. Can you give me a proof? From the Haggadah. Misubin bebnei Brak. They were gathered together, Misubin. What does Misubin mean? They were gathered together. Haseba comes from the word together. Gathered together. Wow, that makes sense. Well, 1 second, he says. What is the halacha when it comes to even korban pesach? How did you bring a korban pesach? You have to do it you have to pre-organize preparation. Again, back to the main word in education. If the teacher is not prepared, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. You've got to prepare for the classroom. You always got to prepare. That's why I tell parents, you got to prepare for Seder. If you're going to make it an engaged experience, you got to prepare for the Seder. Misubin b'bnei Brak. It means that they gathered together. The halacha is in the Chumash, in the Torah, it says that everybody had to eat a kzayas of the korban pesach, and you're not allowed to leave anything over, right? So you have a big cow, lamb. You have a lamb, not a cow, right? And you want to devour it. One person's not going to be able to eat it. So what did you do? You decided which families you were going to be dedicated to this korban pesach. And they had to decide before they brought the korban pesach. Many families could join together as long as there was kazayas for each person, correct? So they gathered together and they did Seder night, mishpachot, families together. Oh, I think that's another lesson that is being taught about education. All fascinating lessons in the framework of education. Framework of education is, where does education begin? Thank you very much. And we forget that so often. It's within the family setting. We are the most important influences upon the child. Things change as the child grows, right? We then peers and etc. But they never forget the family. The family is the foundation. The family is the foundation. And Chazal knew that 100%. And that's why it's so important that the Shabbos table be I grew up, I remember vividly the conversations that would occur at my parents' Shabbos table. And they were conversations that went way beyond just the Parsha. The conversations about all of the problems that Israel was facing and the Jewish people were facing. And there were fascinating comments, articles that were read during the week. There were always conversations that were so important. It's the foundational, the foundational development of the child happens at the table. No question about it. So Haseba is a crucial. One interesting thing doesn't appear in the 4 questions outside of wine. We've resolved that. Anything else that doesn't appear? That's on the ka'ara, and we don't mention it. Charoses. Charoses is not mentioned. You don't raise the charoses. The charoses is not discussed in any of the texts. So Kasher notes, Menachem Kasher notes that charoses wasn't mentioned because charoses, what do you do with charoses? You dip. Now, is that so shocking to a child? Not at all. It dips in Ad Hayom Hazeh, right? A lot of people do the dips, right? Before they begin a meal, they'll take out, they'll have all different types of dips. And that's become very, very popular now. The child wouldn't ask about that. So don't, another lesson in education, don't include anything that will distract the child, that will distract the student. Don't bring distractions into the classrooms. And that's hard, isn't it? You want to keep the child, and now we talk about, I don't know, when I was growing up, nobody talked about ADHD and all of that. And we all had it, but nobody talked about it. Everybody has it, ADHD. What is it? You want laser focus. Well, if you want laser focus, what do you got to do? You have to remove distraction. You really do. It's hard, right? It's hard. So numerous lessons being taught through Manishtana on how our sages felt education takes place. This was the text for education. Now, I want to point out something else from Soloveitchik points out. Fine, we remove the ka'ara, right? We remove the ka'ara, and by the way, so at the very beginning, what did we say? How did we start the discussion? We took the ka'ara away, or we dismantled the tables, correct? Another lesson, the Rav notes, it's what are we interested in doing through Manishtana? What's the goal of Manishtana? Very important lesson. An open discussion must take place. True education is an open, honest discussion, which means nothing is off the table. Excuse the pun here, right? Nothing is off the table. If a child raises, not child that raises the question in the class that wants to take the teacher away from the text. That's not what I'm talking about. A valid, good question should never be stifled. And we all know there are teachers that don't understand this because they're frightened, because they're not prepared. When you're not prepared, you're going to be frightened by the good question. My mother used to say to me all the time, she said, just remember one thing. The teacher is going to spend so much more time at the lesson than the student. And that's the way it must be. Triple, quadruple of the time that it will take the child to absorb it, the teacher has to spend preparing. That is correct, 100%. A good shiur takes me hours to prepare. Here, I just gave a Gemara shiur last night. My Gemara shiur, I don't put less than 3 to 4 hours into the Gemara shiur in serious preparation with sources and everything that I do. And how long is the Gemara shiur? 1 hour. If you're going to teach, you're going to teach. You got to, again, always, I'm keeping on repeating this, be prepared. But Manishtana, the Rav points out, you're removing the ka'ara. And what is Manishtana teaching us? A discussion must flow. Everything is open for discussion. Don't squelch any discussion. Another lesson, another requirement. Now, interesting. We talked about focus, right? It's very focused. Don't have distractions. The question is, when do you bring back the ka'ara? Interesting, right? When do you bring back the ka'ara? You remove the ka'ara from Manishtana. So what would you think? When do you bring back the ka'ara? Do you bring back the ka'ara? When do you bring back the ka'ara? Tosfos and most Rishonim say you bring it back right after Manishtana is over. Okay? You've gotten the flow of questions. Okay, now let's bring back the prop again and let's begin. Why? Because you want, the Tosfos says, based on the Gemara, you want the matzah in front of you when you tell the story of the Haggadah? Why do you want the matzah in front of you when you tell the story?
That's a problem.
It's your prop. Also, what is matzah called? Lechem.
Only.
Lechem oni. What does that mean? Poor man's bread. But it also means, the Gemara says, but it also means lechem. Lechem oni. Oni means, if you will, the bread that gives us the answers. The bread, I would translate it, the bread of discussion. Oh, so you want that prop in front of you so that you will encourage further discussion. So Tosfos says, bring it back. You've begun by using the prop to engage the kids or the people around the table so that they should begin the discussion, but bring it back. Interesting, the Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says, no, you keep it off the table until Rabban Gamliel Omer, Shlosha Devarim. Whoa, you know what that means? At the very end of Magid. Remember, Rabban Gamliel says you have to say three things, Pesach, Matzah, Mara. That's Rabban Gamliel. Where is that? That's at the very end. That's right before Shulchan Aruch. The Rambam does not want the Ka'ara back until then. And Rav Soloveitchik wondered, it would seem that the Rambam doesn't care about Lechamoni. Tosfos makes a lot of sense. Is everybody following? This is a very interesting insight into the Rishonim's understanding, again, of a principle in education, right? And both are valid. So the Tosfos says, no, bring it back. Why does the Tosfos say bring it back? We want to stimulate further discussion. And because lechem oni, right? As the Gemara says, lechem she'onim alav dvarim arbei. It is the bread that stimulates much discussion. Great. But now, what about the Rambam? Why is he keeping it on? So the Rav argues, the Rambam says it's a distraction. No, laser focus. Let's talk about what we have to talk about. Let's not focus on the inconsequential, if you will, the consequential. We got to do what do we have to achieve at Seder night? What did the Rambam say before? I quoted you the Rambam. What did the Rambam say? And you're supposed to tell the story. Well, you have to reenact the story. How are you going to reenact the story? So you got to tell, there's a text. There is a Arami Oved Ovi, right? We're gonna focus on a text. We're going to analyze the text. We're going to be very focused, laser focused. That's how the Rambam understands it. Then the Gemara says, the Halacha says, the Halacha introduces, the Mishnah says, V'kan haben shoel. And now the child will ask. V'kan haben shoel. The Haggadah demands what kind of conversation? Why? And how far do we go back? You said you're 100% right. What does the halacha say? What if you have no children at the table? So then somebody else should ask. And what if you have nobody at the table and you're there alone? No, the Gemara goes, the halacha goes like this. If you have a child, the child asks. If there's no child, then an adult asks. If there's just a husband and wife, the wife asks the husband, right? And what if they're two Talmidei Chachamim and they know the story very well? You have Rabbi Soloveitchik and Rabbi Feinstein, Zichronam Libracha, sitting at the same table, cousins. So I brought them together, right? And they're sitting at the table and nobody else is at the table. What are you supposed to do? Want to ask each other. And if you're by yourself, you have to ask yourself. So the question is, why? Question and answer. Why does Seder night require, by the way, no other night, right? No other night do we insist. No other Jewish experience do we insist. Friday night, does it have to be the Kan Haben Shoel? No. This night we have to. So Rabbi Soloveitchik brilliantly says, because Judaism, another lesson in the Manishtana, Judaism is a quest. It's a journey. It's not static. You're never going to find God unless you search for him. And how does a person search for him? He asks questions. That's a brilliant insight. How did Avram find God? He asked questions. You're not going to find God unless you ask questions. I just read a beautiful story. I must probably hear it in a drasha sometime from that. But so say, hey, didn't he say that once before? Okay, keep it to yourself. But when you hear it, it's a beautiful story. It was a Hasidic Rebbe where this Chassid had a very, very difficult question, and he presented it to everybody in the town, and nobody could answer it. Nobody can answer it. He was devastated by nobody answering his question. And they said, go to the next town, to the Rebbe in the next town. So he goes to the next town, he travels to the next town, and he presents his difficult question. He says, Rebbe, give me an answer. And the Rebbe patches him on the face. And he says, Rebbe, what's so wrong with I did? What did I do? He said, you did nothing wrong. You're searching for an answer, but the answer is not important. Your question was brilliant. Keep the question. Don't necessarily search for the answer. The question is what's important. You're questioning, right? It's a brilliant insight. The question, you don't always get an answer, but always question. Always be, as the Rav says, if one does not search for God, if a Jew does not keep in mind where there is a road leading to the temple, then he or she will never find the temple. If you don't search, the quest for God is a long journey. It's here, he says, at Seder, we try to stimulate the naive curiosity of the children, thereby making them God searchers for the rest of their lives. You know what the Manishtana is? Making our children God searchers. It's just, everybody looks at Manishtana from they'll analyze, what does Mesubim mean? What does this mean? What does that? No, I'm suggesting if you really pay attention to Manishtana, it is a formula of how education is to take place.
I think, forgive me for interrupting, Rabbi, the special word that you mentioned just a second ago, the Arba'a Kushiyot.
Right.
The word Kushiyah,
Yeah.
this is the whole point here.
And what is the shoresh of Kushiyah? Kasher. It's difficult. And there's nothing wrong with living with a question. How do I know that? Judaism believes that's okay to live with questions. How do I know that? Teiku. Tishbi Yitaritz Kushav Zabai. The Gemara it doesn't mean, but the Rav said that. He once asked his father, why are there so many places in Shas where they throw up their hands and they say, Teiku? We don't know. He says, because my dear son, there's nothing wrong with living with a question. You don't always get answers. And that is the experience of humanity. We're finite. We're infinite. Then we have to have every answer. We're not infinite. It's the humility that is so important that you don't always get answers. And by the way, that's a crucial lesson to teach, in particular high school kids, teenagers. Teenagers think they have to get answers to everything. And if they don't get answers, it's not true. It's not true. And they only learn later on in life. There's nothing wrong with a good question. The patch in the face. He says, you want the answer. You think the answer is what's important. It's not the answer what's important. Keep asking good questions. Hopefully you'll get an answer that will satisfy you. And if you don't, live with it. Take it. Live with it. That's, yeah.
I have a question here.
Good. I have many more yet to ask. Yeah.
Very simple. From year to year, those stages were asking the same question at the Seder, Rabbi Tafon and the rest of them. When they were said,
were they asking the Manishtana? They were asking the Manishtana, sure, and they're going to be on a different level than you and I when they pursue it, right? Yeah, 100%. Oh, are you expected those? Let's go back. Who is supposed to say the Manishtana? So we didn't answer that. So the Rav points out, he says, it's impossible, I quote the Rav, it's impossible to foresee what kind of a question a child will ask. We're interested in this, quite simply, he says, the children's minds work differently from ours. Provoking children to ask and arousing their curiosity does not mean working with them for weeks before Pesach to memorize a text. The mitzvah is that the child should ask spontaneously, not to be coached in advance. Children have their own naive questions. They formulate it in their own way. Children, therefore, should be encouraged to do that. It can be 4 questions. It can be only 1, depending upon the intelligence, curiosity, precociousness of a child. The Manishtana, according to the Rambam, he says, was not designed for the child. It is too difficult a text. Rather, the one who presides over the Seder says, Manishtana. He says, this is the way my grandfather Rav Chaim used to do it. Because of the Rambam's position, every member of the household, adults as well as children, would say Manishtana, for we no longer follow the practice of having one person recite the Haggadah on behalf of everyone. That's brilliant. It's so insightful. Again, what did I tell you? What did I do with my girls? And I do it, the boys, my grandsons, bring their notebooks to the table, but we're not expecting, that's not the exciting part of they want, Zadie, we have questions. Zadie, we have questions. Okay, so put away your notebooks. I'm very impressed that Y&J is doing a good job in educating you, and they prepared you. The schools feel that they have to, and they have to show off. Don't show off so much. 100%. We over prepare them. No. See, you're not. I'm not fighting. I'm not going to fight that. That battle is long. That boat has long since sailed, right? 100%. But you, the parent, of course, you're going to encourage the child to demonstrate the beautiful notebooks, and they're very impressive, and you should encourage the child. Don't get me wrong, and we do, and I do with my grandchildren, 100%. But don't leave it at that level. Don't leave it at that level. Move it along, that you're prepared and that you're asking them questions. You have to do the preparation, not so much them. What is the word manishtana? What does the word ma mean? It means, no, it does not mean what. No, who said manorama makom hazeh? Yaakov. Yaakov. How in it's a statement, it's not a question. If it was a question, then it would be 5 questions, not 4. Manishtana is a declaration. How different. In other words, wow. That's what ma means. Wow. Let's take a look. This night is unique beyond any other night. Right? Again, so I'll wrap it up because it's late already. But so what did I want to teach? What I wanted to impart was here he says, by the way, I'm going to give you the source. The pasuk says, "Ki yishalcha bincha machor." Ki yishalcha bincha machor. Where is the pasuk? And the next word is ma. So ma is taken straight from that pasuk, and your child will ask you, and here is it. Mazos, manishtana. Some want to say that's where the ma comes from, but the ma is not a question. Ma is a statement of exaltation.
What about with the 4 sons? The simple son says mazos.
Mazos. Sometimes
Then it's what?
it could be, but in the manishtana, it's a declaration, right? It's a declaration. So just to wrap up, the manishtana is a formula of Chazal's understanding how education must take place. So among the lessons, 1, you have to have good education requires preparation. Number 2, visual props are always appropriate. Always. The more visual you make it, the more it will remain. I forgot to say, why is it so important that you have a give and take, a question, answer?
Engaging.
That's correct. The passive learning,
It's not,
I'll tell you an interesting story. Last week, we had the scholar in residence with Rabbi Leibowitz. He's a master, by the way, in question answer. He did it in high school. He would teach Gemaras like that. He would teach the Gemara, but then he would take the Gemara and say, okay, this question from this Gemara, halachically, and he would share them a modern question that emanated straight from the Gemara, and the kids loved it. The kids waited for this. They learned the Gemara, but then they saw the Gemara come alive. I do that every Gemara share as well. Let's see what the halachos are from this Gemara. I'll give you an example. I'm dealing with the Gemara that we learned last night in Tanis. It deals with we're Pesach. We're going to be stopping to say the same Talamat Livracha. We've been saying it all winter long, right? We started with December 4th, December 5th, whatever it was, through first night of Kol HaMoed Pesach. Then the summer begins. We don't want rain any longer. We might not want rain right now either. We said, and it's coming again next week. So, okay, whatever. Baruch Hashem, we needed the rain. We needed the rain, fine. And the snow is good for us because it'll give us more water. But anyhow, the question was raised, and I gave them, I Xeroxed the text. In Brazil sent a question at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century to the rabbis. We live opposite the climate of yours. Your summer is our winter, right? Our summer is your winter. What happens? In other words, we need rain from Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz. We needed rain from May, June, July, August. You don't want rain May, June, July, August. We want rain May, June, July, August. That's fascinating. What do you do? The Gemara was dealing with it. What do? Do you say the same Talamat Livracha then and switch it or not? But I gave them the text. There it was, a real live question that came from, it could have been Australia. It could have
I
been.
would think it actually more relevant in Australia.
It's
Brazil
of relevance in South America too.
or South Africa. They have rain.
They-
Brazil has rain all around.
And not only that, they pointed out, if the rain comes during their summer and not during their winter, if the rain comes in September, October, November, December, it will cause damage, not only to their property, but health-wise. Malaria, etc., a whole slew of problems. Rabbis, what do? Interesting question, right? You take the Gemara and you bring it into reality. Here is the Shiloh. You're interested in knowing, I can see what the answer is. The answer is, no, right. Smack, good question, smack. No, it's the same Talmud Bracha they will put into Shomei Tefillah. They will not put it in Birchas Hashanah. They don't put it in Barei Chaleinu Hashanah Azos V'Kol Minei Svuos L'Tova. The same Talmud Bracha, they don't put it there. They put it in Shema Koleinu Hashem Elokeinu. The same Talmud Bracha. That's when they put it in. Okay.
So do they say it all the same place that we say it? Or don't say it?
No, they don't say the same Talmud Bracha as we say it, number one. But what was most interesting, Mashiv Haruach HaMoed HaGoshem is a totally different type of tefillah. The same Talmud Bracha is what we call a bakasha, a request. Mashiv Haruach HaMoed HaGoshem is a descriptive comment about God. And there, the poskim say, everybody has to say it together. So in Eretz Yisrael, we start that Shmini Atzeres, everybody should say it the same, because we're describing God. And Klal Yisrael should be united in its description of God. It's a beautiful concept. But yeah, right. Anyhow, it became alive. So, okay. So good education needs preparation. It needs visual props. The more props you have, the better. Halacha needs to be current. Very important. And that raised the question of Heseba, right? Is Heseba current or isn't it? So we didn't conclude that totally. We said Menachem Kasher's interesting creative idea, but we don't paskin that Heseba. It doesn't mean that it's not current when you're reenacting something of historic value. That is current. You're taking yourself back to their way of life, which is important. It might very well be Oh, but then you're going to say, Chayav Adam Liros es Atzmo. Yeah, I am experiencing it, but I am experiencing it also through the fact that I am living history, right? When they get dressed up in all of the costumes, that's not current, right? But it makes it relative. It makes it relevant. Thank you. It makes it relevant. Okay, the experience has to be elegant, right? We learned that. The experience has to be elegant. It has to be impressive. I think that's important. The table has to look beautiful. The wine should be better than usual, whatever you like. That's always a question that, by the way, that's always a question that comes up. Lahalacha. I can't stand wine. The person says to me, I just can't drink it. It doesn't bother. So Rav Soloveitchik said, oh, so drink grape juice. Okay, fine. Other poskim disagreed. Other poskim said, no, the alcohol experience. But the Rav said, excuse me, if it's going to give you a terrible reaction, then don't drink it. Okay, I drink what my son-in-laws laugh. They think it's soda pop. I drink, Moscato or Joyvin, the 5% alcohol. And by the time I get to the fourth cup with 5% alcohol, I feel it. I feel it. By the second cup, I feel it already, right? Okay. Seder night is a unique Jewish experience. We have to know the goal. Maybe that's the way I should have framed it. The goal. Remember, I talked about that on Shabbos in the drasha. You have to know your goal. How we're going to achieve the goal, but what's the goal of Seder night? A Jewish experience. And there's nothing wrong with being parochial sometimes, I don't know why we're so fascinated. People are so fascinated to bring non-Jews to the table. I suppose if somebody asks, I want to be at your Seder. Oh, okay. Depending upon who the person is. Okay. Then you have to deal with the halachic questions, Bishul, Yontif, etc. I would tell them, if you're going to bring a non-Jew to the table, try doing it on a year where it's a Shabbos Yontif. It's much easier halacha with Shabbos because there's no cooking. The problem is cooking for a non-Jew on Yontif, right? Okay. Number 5 or 6 lesson is family is the source of the foundation of all education. It is crucial. Family is crucial. Why isn't charoses included? Another lesson. Why? Because remove all distractions. You want to focus, want to be laser focused. If the child is not going to think that is important, which he won't because he sees dips all the time, don't do it. There needs to be an environment that encourages questioning. Another lesson, and encourages questioning. And we have to teach our children there's nothing wrong with living with a good question. You don't necessarily have to get all of the answers. So those are the lessons I wanted to demonstrate. The Manishtana teaches, by the way, you can analyze the Manishtana. It's a whole different kind of shear. Why is it laid out the way it is laid out, with chametz and matzah being the first question, and shari and mara the second question, and the third question dipping, and the fourth question reclining. Rabbi Riskin has an interesting thing. He thinks that all of the questions here revolve around the tension between freedom and servitude, and how you have to live with both. He demonstrates that chametz, matzah, maror, shar yirah. He does a very interesting possibility. He says that's what is the 4 questions. These were the 4 questions that were chosen to demonstrate that we live with this. These are my words. We live in the area called gray, not black and white. Not everything's free, not everything's servitude. We live in that middle area called gray. People don't like gray. People like black and white. I remember Rav Aaron Lichtenstein pointing that out. And he said that modern orthodoxy is hard to sell. You know why? Not because of commitment. Modern orthodoxy, because people like black and white. And modern orthodoxy says there's room for gray. I have to live in both worlds. I have to live in both worlds. How do I handle that? Well, You know, black and white is this is kosher, this is treif, right? Well, there's something in between. There's parva. How do you live with parva? You know, and it's true. It's very difficult. Which is the weak, people, where do you, on a seesaw, I remember he said, right, on a seesaw, you either up or you're down. Which is the one place that people, nobody wants to sit in the middle. They want to go up or they want to go down. They don't want to sit in the middle. Okay, anyhow, that's what I wanted to teach you.
What have something very interesting now, or at least for me, I found it really very interesting. The Arba'a Kushiyot here
Yes,
actually has everything in it. Whatever you just said, everything. is-
exactly. Yeah, that's the idea. 100%. 100%. Yeah,
Thank you very
And
much.
100%.
So my question to this is, we are saying it's only at the Seder night,
Right.
but actually I think this we need to live all our life.
100%. This becomes the model for the rest of the year. This is the model of Jewish education. If I was teaching teachers, I would use, and I was, give a class to teachers how to teach, I would use this as the text, and I would teach them exactly what I just said. All of these points. Let's talk about how to make the classroom exciting. 100%. Okay, everybody should have a Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
Okay, so today is the last.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes, next week already. Thank you. You're welcome.
Will you relay
Yeah.
after Pesach?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes. Not right after Pesach. I'll be in Eretz Yisrael in UAE. But yes, when I get back.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, it's Shelley Rube.
Yes, Shelley.
I wanted to thank you so much, and I wanted to tell you that you are a unique, incredible,
Thank you.
blessed. No, you are such.
Thank you.
Your teachings, your knowledge, you're very unique and incredible, and
Thank you.
it's so enjoyable to learn with you.
Thank you.
And a beautiful Chag Kosher Sameach.